Welcome to this special broadcast on I-24 News. I'm Caleb Ben David. It is day 248 of Israel at war. And following the daring rescue of 4 Israeli hostages from Gaza this weekend, there was renewed focus on whether a deal can be advanced to free more of the captives. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken touched down in Israel a few hours ago and met with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in Jerusalem just a short time ago, ahead of discussions with other Israeli officials and with hostage families. Now, earlier today, Blinken kicked off his 8th visit to the Mideast since October 7th by meeting Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi in Cairo, and there urged regional leaders to pressure Hamas to accept the latest hostage release for ceasefire proposal. Blinken's visit comes amid a new report that the Biden administration is examining the option of conducting its own unilateral negotiations with Hamas without Israeli involvement in order to get the release specifically of hostages who hold U.S. citizenship. Jody, who is on the Israel-Gaza border near Sderot, and Nicole, Rafah, again, the focus now, and the battle continuing after a very successful weekend for Israel on certainly on Saturday.
Absolutely. This is a situation that the IDF is pointing to and stating that after the months of intelligence they've been able to gather, they were able to have this insanely successful, against a lot of difficult circumstances, rescue mission. But now the fighting does continue, really in 2 areas that we're seeing, Kalev. As you mentioned, in the southern city of Rafah, this gives us a glimpse as to some of the fighting that we're seeing in both the central and southern part of the Gaza Strip right now, as the IDF works to eliminate the Hamas terrorists, the Hamas infrastructure, and gain intelligence as well, possibly leading to more hotspots of Hamas terrorists and possibly the hostages as well.
Right, really striking. We saw that footage as you were describing it, Nicole Tzedek, there by the Israel-Gaza border. Thank you for that. And staying with Gaza, what details are emerging both about Saturday's rescue mission of 4 Israeli hostages and the circumstances in which they were kept prisoners. Questions are being raised in particular about a Gaza journalist who provided his home as the prison in which 3 of the hostages were held, and what his participation means in the debate over the role played by some civilians in the, if you can call them that, in the conflict with Israel. Middle East correspondent Ariel Oseran has the story.
In the aftermath of Saturday's daring daytime operation in Gaza's Nuseirat camp, new details are emerging regarding the holding conditions of the 4 Israeli hostages who were liberated in the raid, and also who was holding them. According to the IDF, the 3 male hostages, Almog Mirjan, Andrei Kozlov, and Shlomi Ziv, were held by Gaza journalist Abdallah al-Jamal and his family members at their home in the central Gaza camp. The 4th hostage, Noar Gamani, was freed from a 2nd home, located roughly 200 yards away.
The intelligence leading up to the raid enabled us to conduct an operation in the heart of a civilian neighborhood, where Hamas deliberately hides the hostages in the homes of civilians, with civilians inside. These houses are guarded by armed terrorists, keeping the hostages confined.
Jamal, a former spokesperson for Hamas's information ministry, was a freelance contributor to the Palestine Chronicle, a U.S.-based online outlet. The Chronicle said it was saddened by Jamal's death, noting his reports, quote, focused entirely on the humanitarian situation in Gaza. Amid claims Jamal worked as a contributor for Al Jazeera, the Qatari news outlet issued a denial, calling the allegations, quote, completely unfounded.
Let's shift focus now, though, to the battle across Israel's border with Lebanon, because air raid sirens did ring out earlier today as far south as Akko and Haifa, with the air defense systems detecting a suspicious aerial object from Lebanon. Military drones, which are increasingly being used by Hezbollah, are certainly a possibility there, with the Iran-backed militia launching UAVs later in the day in both the western Galilee and towards the Golan Heights. Well, for more on the northern front, let's go to our correspondent, Robert Swift, who's near the Lebanon border, and increasingly, as I said, Robert, drone fire, not just, of course, we've seen other kinds of fire, seems to be a weapon of choice of Hezbollah.
Yeah, that's right. There has been a mixture of types of attacks today. Earlier in the day, there was a series of anti-tank missiles launched, and there have been some rockets, it does appear, but it has been the drones which have been the main story of today. There's been drone sirens going off on multiple occasions, both on the western end of Israel's northern border and from where we're reporting on the eastern end of the border. Now,
we discussed a new report that the U.S. is weighing whether to conduct its own negotiations with Hamas in order to obtain the release of those hostages in Gaza with American citizenship. Now, one of those is Hirsch Goldberg Polin, an American-Israeli abducted from the Nova Music Festival. Earlier, I spoke with his father, John Polin, about that option and other developments related to the hostage issue. And staying with the hostage issue, the UN Security Council is holding a special session today debating and voting on a U.S. draft resolution on a Gaza ceasefire and hostage deal. It is based, of course, on the latest mediated proposal, which still awaits Hamas approval. For more, let's go to our senior U.S. correspondent, Mike Wagenheim, there at the UN. And Mike, tell us about this discussion there that's due to take place shortly at the UN.
It looks like we're going to have a vote coming up on the U.S. drafted resolution this afternoon, likely around 3:30-ish Eastern time. That'd be about 10:30 p.m. Israel time. The Israeli mission to the UN is not commenting on the record about their current position on the resolution, but from all indications, they're not particularly happy that it's moving forward here. This U.S. drafted resolution will call for Hamas to accept what the U.S. says Israel has already accepted, which is the proposal that Israel put forward several weeks ago, which was announced by U.S. President Joe Biden on May the 31st, a multi-phased proposal to end the Israel-Hamas conflict. It would start with a ceasefire to be followed by the release of an untold number of Israeli hostages being held in.
Benjamin Netanyahu's government is on a little shaky ground today after the departure of Benny Gantz and his National Unity Party, which only widens the rift both inside the coalition and among the Israeli public. Well, how much longer can this government last? Our Joe Brown breaks it down.
Regrettably, Netanyahu is preventing us from progressing toward true victory, which is the justification for the ongoing and painful cost of war. That is why we are leaving the emergency government today with a heavy heart, but with full confidence.
It came as a shock to nobody, but Benny Gantz's resignation from the Israeli war cabinet could spell big trouble for both Israel's war efforts and the Benjamin Netanyahu government.